this whole situation with the Global Engagement Center and the Iran disinfo
Right.
contract. So I'd like just to, what is the status of that funding right now? Is it still suspended? What steps are you taking to, well, it was suspended. Why?
Yes.
How were they operating outside the scope? I mean, they were clearly going after quote-unquote disinformation, but not from the Iranian government, which was their charge. But how specifically did they go outside their mandate, and where have there been steps taken to make sure that they stay within their remit?
Yes, so the funding does remain suspended for this entity. And there's a review process that's ongoing right now. The review process continues, and that is going to, of course, ensure that the implementer's activity is consistent within the scope of work. And of course, it needs to be consistent within the Department of State's guidance on conducting these sort of activities within the GEC. I think we use GEC as shorthand, but many people know the Global Engagement Center is committed to its mission, which is to counter foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation that comes from a variety of places, but that includes the Iranian regime's propaganda disinformation. So I'm not going to get into the specific details up here, but that the review is ongoing, and the implementer remains suspended at the moment.
Well, is it possible that this implementer will not, so that the money won't be reinstated? Is that a possible option here?
I think all options are possible while we're undergoing a review.
And then, just lastly on this, it appears since the first reports came out and the suspension was announced, it has come out that this organization that was getting U.S. taxpayer money was, some of the people that it was attacking worked for U.S. taxpayer-funded organizations. Is that in any way appropriate?
Again, the GEC found that their implementer went beyond the scope of their contract, and that's why their contract has been suspended. They're under a review, and the GEC's leadership has, of course, spent time and had a meeting with them to outline initially what they did that went beyond the scope.
Right.
I think that's all I have for
Well,
that
what
matter.
are they going to
Next.
do, not specifically in this, what are they
Yeah.
going to do to
That's all I
make
have
sure
on
this
that.
doesn't happen in the future with this or any other
Yeah,
project?
whether it's the GEC or any other institution within the Department of State, we work judiciously to review what our implementers and contractors do around the world, and we have a variety of mechanisms, including the IG, which does its own internal reviews for every contract that the State Department produces, and we'll follow those same guidelines with the GEC. Go ahead.
I have two questions on Iran.
Sure.
IAEA chief has said today that Iran is now producing more enriched uranium than before. Are you aware of that? And
Did you say that he said more?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Just want to make sure we're on the same
Yeah,
page.
this is my first question. And my second is Lebanese national and U.S. permanent resident Nizar Zakka has been released from prison, and he will be going back to Lebanon tomorrow. How do you view this development?
So on your second question, we're aware of those public reports, but we don't have anything to comment on from the podium today. As it relates to your first question on Iran, I mean, obviously, we see these reports showing that Iran is going in the wrong direction. And it underscores the continuing challenge Iran poses to international peace and security. This is something that I've been a part, many of you know, I was traveling for the last week with the Secretary, part of many conversations with our European allies on this topic, and we think it's important for the international community to remain united to hold the Iranian regime accountable. And I know that we left those meetings very encouraged that our European allies will do so. Saeed, how are you?
I want to move another topic.
Follow up on Iran.
Please? Can we stay on Iran?
Go ahead, Leslie.
Given that Mr. Zakka is a U.S. Has a green card, has the U.S. been involved in any of these discussions? And is there a possibility that this involves some kind of a swap with an Iranian businessman that is being held here, according to reports?
If we certainly hope that these reports are accurate, that he has been released, and if they are accurate, we will certainly come back to you with more information. But for now, that's the only comment that we have. Are you on Iran?
On Iran,
Okay.
yes. What's your view of
I'll
Germany's?
get back to you, Saeed, I promise.
What's your view of Germany's proposal for a European payment system for trade with Iran that he raised when he was in Tehran?
Yeah, I mean, I think the secretary spoke about this, and he has said, of course, you know, any payment systems in which there are goods or services or whatever the commodity might be that is not sanctioned by the U.S. government is fine. But we would not support any payment mechanism from any country in the world that would allow businesses or entities or countries to engage in transactions with Iran that are sanctioned entities. And we are very grateful to the number of European businesses and banks who have taken these sanctions incredibly seriously and are complying with them.
And if I could, I just ask
Go
about-
ahead. No, I've come, Saeed's turn. Go ahead.
I want to move to the Palestinian issue. Over the weekend, Morgan, the
Yeah.
ambassador to Israel, Mr. David Friedman, gave an interview or told the New York Times that Israel has a right to annex parts of the West Bank. Is that now U.S. policy? And if it's not, are you going to, let's say, call Mr. Friedman for any kind of disciplinary action?
There is no plan for any sort of disciplinary action of all. The administration's position on the settlements have not changed. Our policy on the West Bank has not changed, and I don't think there's anything new to report
So
there.
when he gives these interviews and says that something like this, how is that interpreted at this building? Is he in step or with the Secretary of State? How did he clear it with the Secretary of State? How does he go about it? And you're saying that there is no disciplinary action, but obviously this is not U.S. policy, is it?
Well, yeah, I'd have to look again at the context of his interview, but I'd say that the ambassador, the secretary, and everyone who is involved in the Middle East Peace Plan or in this entire administration is working towards a comprehensive and lasting peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We certainly see a brighter future for the Palestinian people than what they have encountered, and that's why we continue to work on this plan and work behind the scenes. I think it's important to note, from the authority of this podium that our policy on the West Bank has not changed.
And the Secretary...
Can we follow?
Mexico? Sure.
Just to follow up on
Can we
some
follow-
of the Secretary's remarks, the President also tweeted that Mexico had agreed to buy large quantities of agricultural products from the U.S., and the Mexican Foreign Minister said that there was no such agreement to buy those products. So obviously that language was not in the joint statement that was announced Friday night. So is there some agricultural component to this agreement that hasn't yet been released?
I don't think that I'm going to go beyond what the Secretary just said to you a few minutes ago, and what the President talked about. I mean, clearly, as our two countries to work more closely together, and clearly as we hope to see the passage of the U.S. MCA in Congress, that will open up more opportunities for agriculture and a host of other commodities and services. So we'll leave it at that. Beatrice?
The Secretary,
Beatrice, right?
Yes,
Great.
thank you. The Secretary mentioned that the U.S. is now going to work with Central American countries to prevent their citizens from leaving. So could you please give us some detail about this? Have the negotiations started? What would be on the table?
Again, I think that the Secretary just gave all of you, 10 or 20 minutes here on this, and I'm going to let his words speak for that. I think I would just reiterate that we, listen, I spent a lot of time with, on Friday, as all of you did, Christine and others who were standing outside waiting, spent a lot of time talking to our negotiators. And it wasn't just on Friday, by the way. I think, as you know, it began on Wednesday with a meeting at the White House with the Vice President and Secretary Pompeo and others. And then, of course, there were more meetings on Thursday and then the marathon meetings on Friday. And as I spoke to our negotiators throughout that entire time, it was a tough and hard negotiation, but we got to the place in the end, which, of course, we believe represents a new commitment from Mexico, the largest ever deployment, I believe the Secretary just said, of forces to its southern border. Mexico is going to start taking operational control of its southern border for the first time. And I know that I'm I can speak, I think, on behalf of the department, that we're very proud of our team who spent hours, literally hours on Friday negotiating this. We will, of course, as the Secretary just said, have to have ongoing and continuing talks and negotiations with our Mexican counterparts. Yes.
Hi, thank you, Morgan. On North Korea,
Yes.
and when North Korean Kim Jong-un
It's okay. We'll come back.
North Korean Kim Jong-un has recently replaced the negotiation team with the United States, and also reportedly said that several previous negotiating teams were sent to prison camp. Do you have any information on this, or how did you?
We don't have any
implement it?
information on that. We have read those reports. And, you know, the president and the secretary have said all along that, of course, while our economic sanctions remain, we remain open to talking and to negotiations with the North Koreans, and I don't think our position has changed there.
Can I follow up on North Korea?
Sure.
This week's the 1-year anniversary since the Singapore summit. So can you just characterize how the State Department sees specifically denuclearization progress since the Singapore summit? And it seems like talks are kind of in a stall right now. So what are the plans moving forward to restart negotiations?
Well, you know, it will be coming up towards the 1 year, as you said. We think that this is, and many people who come before us would say that this is one of the toughest national security challenges for any administration, probably one of the toughest that we will certainly, all of us will face in our lifetime. And we, of course, there has been steps that have been taken along the way. We've been able to get our North Korean counterparts to the table where they have committed to the president and to the Secretary of State that they will denuclearize. And of course, we have Steve Biegun working on this diligently. And, you know, the path, if you look throughout history, at any successful negotiation or any outcome, it's never linear, right? There's always ups and downs, and we remain confident that Kim Jong-un and his government will see a path for a brighter future for the North Korean people, and 1 year later, that's what we are still aspiring to and still hoping for, while noting, of course, that economic sanctions do remain. Hi.
Hi, this is June with WATB.
I love your accent.
Thank
Feel
you.
like
I'm
I'm
from
at
Nashville. From Nashville.
Good for you.
The LGBTQ flag on
Yes.
the embassies. Can you explain the position of the State Department on that, on both inside the embassies and on the outside?
Sure. I think Pride Month that we're in right now was celebrated around the world by many State Department employees, by many embassies. The Secretary has the position that, as it relates to the flagpole, that only the American flag should be flown there. But he, of course, as he said in his congressional testimony, respects the dignity of every individual. And I think all of you can do a simple, easy Google or Twitter search and see the pictures of members, embassies, and members, ambassadors, people of the Foreign Service celebrating Pride throughout the world.
The second
Yes.
question.
Is it
Go ahead, Nick.
correct?
A quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Can you explain why the Secretary decided not to issue a statement marking Pride Month and also the last month, the International Day Against Transphobia and Homophobia? Those were statements that were typically released annually on those days, but we didn't see those statements this year. That's provoked some concern that the Secretary didn't lend as much importance to these issues.
Sure, I think that, as I said, and the Secretary said in his testimony, he respects the dignity of every individual and of every human life, and he remains committed to this effort around the world. I think it was just a couple weeks ago, I have to look at the specific date, we had Magnitsky sanctions, and I'll get the specific name for you, on an individual who of course, was persecuting people of the LGBTQ community. The Secretary will, of course, next month host the Religious Freedom Forum that he also had last year. And he works around the world in these meetings to talk about religious freedom, religious liberty, and that's something that I know is very dear to him.
Can you explain, Morgan, can you explain the displays that we have seen of the LGBTQ flag, the colors, the pennants, banners? Those are not in violation of any kind of edict or order, are they? So what this idea that there's some kind of revolt among diplomats in the embassies? Is there anything that these are in violation? I mean, I'm not quite
There's
sure.
no violation that I'm.
So as long as it's not on the flag pole that flies the American flag, the Secretary or nobody else in this building has any issue with it. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mexico?
No, let's go back to Mexico.
Okay, just to
I think we're done.
clarify, what exactly was different than what the agreements that were nearly reached in December on this? The Secretary didn't mention any points that were actually different.
I don't think that's fair. I think that he mentioned a number of points. The president has tweeted about it as well. And we certainly laid out in the joint declaration, which was released Friday night, the ways in which that the U.S. and Mexican government would be working together. As I just said, I think at the top, this is the largest ever deployment of Mexican security forces to its southern border. Mexico is, of course, committed to taking operational control of its southern border. Mexico is committed.
But how does that differ from December?
This is what I'm telling you. You can interrupt, but the answer will be the same. Mexico is also committed to expansion of the migrant protection protocols. And then, of course, in the joint declaration, we said that additional measures will be looked at within the next 90 days. Friday night, the marathon night, was not certainly the first or the last discussion that the Secretary and his counterparts will have. Today, is day one, or maybe you could count Saturday, as day one. Success will be a dramatic reduction in the flows on our shared border. And we won't get into specific numbers, but we expect to see dramatic reductions in the coming weeks and months. And I would say that the Mexican government was incredibly confident in the actions that they were taking, that we would see dramatic reductions.
But you can't say how this different
Go
from what?
ahead.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. This is Jahan Zaybali from Airline Industry Pakistan.
Hello.
I just wanted to ask about the ongoing recon process in Afghanistan, the peace process. So,
Yes.
a couple of months ago, we were told by Mr. Pladino that there was some kind of meaningful progress on
He
the...
told you?
He told that briefing. He
I
told
don't know
that
if you should have
briefing,
listened to
actually.
him.
I asked that question. So about, after that meaningful progress, we have seen Taliban brutalities, not only with the Afghan soldiers, but with the innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
So what went wrong after that? After that meaningful progress?
Yeah. Listen, I don't think that anything went wrong. This is, General Miller once said, this is one of my favorite quotes of his. He said, you have to be ready to talk and to fight at the same time. And that's certainly what we're seeing in Afghanistan. We have 4 pillars that Ambassador Khalilzad is working on in Afghanistan: troop withdrawal, counterterrorism assurances and cooperation, intra-Afghan dialogue, reduction in violence. I think some of you know that the ambassador, that Khalilzad, is in Kabul right now. He met with Ghani yesterday, and he and President Ghani spoke at length about preparation for intra-Afghan negotiations, and he knows that's now essential. I will be briefing not tomorrow, but on Wednesday, hopefully, and we'll certainly, I think, have more to tell you about as it relates to Zal's meeting.
So it's like
You guys, so we've been here for almost 40 minutes, and I have actually 2 of the most important people in my life here today, which are my little nephews, Alec and Maddox Weinberger. So we're going to end the briefing, and thank you so much. I will see you, if not tomorrow, I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Is it hot in here or just me? Oh.